Hey, everybody. So sorry we weren't able to join you yesterday for our live. We're very excited today to have a super special episode and a super special guest. So today we wanted to talk about one of the really important aspects of Harambe is we're asking through the lens of Harambe's story for all of us to reconsider how these animals are treated in zoos and in general in society, and what is our relationship to nature around us. And there is one word that encapsulates this, and that is speciesism. That is at the root of so many of the problems that animals face worldwide through exploitation. And what is speciesism? Well, the best way to answer that actually is going to be our guest today, who I'm so excited about because I'm in the middle of rereading his book, and this book really changed my life a long time ago by reading this, Animal Liberation. If you have not read a copy of it, I would recommend it. Peter didn't know I was reading it, but we are going to talk about speciesism today with Peter Singer and learn a little bit more about how we can reconceive the world around us. What is speciesism, and how can we tackle the problem of it? Thank you so much for joining today to talk to our audience about this. Can you explain to us the concept of what is speciesism?
Speciesism is a prejudice or bias against beings because of the species that they are, and usually that means that they're just not a member of the species Homo sapien, the human species, in other words. Sometimes it can mean, for example, that they're not a dog or a cat, but they are, let's say, a pig or a chicken. So we can be biased in that sort of way, as well as biased against our own species. But basically, it's why people say all human beings have human rights, but animals are excluded from human rights. They don't have, or they don't have the same rights as humans. And uh, if we ask why, sometimes people will say things like, "Well, we are more rational, we are more autonomous, we are moral agents, and they are not." But then when you point out that there are some members of the species Homo sapien who are not more rational, autonomous, and not more have no more moral agency than many non-human animals. I'm talking, for example, about all of us when we were babies, but also some of us, unfortunately, some humans, some members of our species are permanently intellectually disabled, and yet we don't think that they lack rights because of that. So that suggests that it is the species line that we're using to justify our allegedly higher moral status, uh, possession of rights, sanctity of our life, some people would say, when we deny that to all other species.
Now, for people that are just hearing the term or contemplating it or have been recently starting on the journey of thinking about the importance of redefining our relationship with the world around us, um, what what sort of I guess advice, or what, as far as speciesism goes, what what's the path forward? How can people stop this terrible habit of thinking that every other form of life is not as important as ours?
Well, it's quite a radical change in our thinking, but it's parallel to some of the changes we've seen in trying to overcome racism. I would say the stage that speciesism is at today is similar to that racism was at when the slave trade and the possession of ownership of slaves was accepted, at least in some societies, uh, because that's really where we are with animals. We are enslaving them. We are thinking of them as things, as instruments to use for our ends, whether that's the production of meat or milk or eggs, or their use in research, for example. So it's a big struggle to overcome speciesism, and it's going to take some time. I think the best place to start is in what we eat, um, because the raising of animals for food, in particular industrial raising of animals for food, what's called factory farming, is probably the largest and the worst source of suffering of animals because the numbers are just so huge. We raise perhaps 200 billion animals a year for human consumption. It's a vast number, and they are very closely confined. They are treated really badly. Anything will be done to them that is uh, desirable in the interests of those operating the businesses, which basically means to make it cheaper to produce the products, and no real thought is given to the well-being of the animals themselves. Um, as long as they are productive, that's all that's required. So I suggest people start there, that they particularly boycott these products of factory farms, which is the vast majority of the animal products that are sold, um, and ideally go completely vegetarian or vegan if they can do that. I think that's a positive step forward. And of course, people can support animal advocacy organizations, um,
Right.
donate to them, volunteer their time for them, and in that way, uh, support a real change in our thinking about animals.
And yes, that, and that is one of the biggest entry points into the cruelty that we see today is the food, the diets. And I know a lot of people have been changing over and trying meatless Mondays, moving towards big changes, and hopefully we can see changes during the holidays when a lot of the factory farms really ramp up. And there's a lot more to discuss about that.
There certainly is. Yes, it's a big industry, and of course, every step towards this goal helps. There are some
Mhm.
people who find it difficult to give up meat entirely, and they instead reduce their meat consumption, which of course also means they're reducing their greenhouse gas emissions footprint because the animal industry is a major producers of greenhouse gas emissions. So, if you reduce maybe you mentioned meatless Mondays, that's a start, but maybe you could do meatless Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays, or gradually build up to that point. And the more meat you cut out of your diet, the more animal products you cut out of your diet, the better it will be for reducing animal suffering, the better it will be for reducing your greenhouse gas footprints, and I think the better it'll be for your own health as well.
Now, when we talk about factory farming and animal agriculture, a lot of people have a hard time finding the empathy for something they consider so different from them. And I think that once you start to consider speciesism, you find that the other animals are not very different from us. They all have very rich and textured emotional lives, family lives, social lives. And in your books, you really bring that out. You bring out the fact that we share so many ritualistic moments with so many other species on the planet, that we are all one species. And that's what I wanted to ask you about Harambe. When you saw it, he's in a slightly different situation, because it's more the exhibit entertainment captivity versus the raised for slaughter captivity, and both are crazy. But I wanted to ask what your thoughts were on Harambe and on our keeping of some of our closest living relatives in these captive situations.
Yes, I you know, certainly, in a way, Harambe has better conditions than the billions of factory farmed pigs, cows, chickens that people consume. But still, it was a very limited environment for a gorilla who normally would be roaming around through forests or you know, mountain areas, uh, part of a social group. They're social animals as we are, and um, to live with by themselves or with only one or two companions is not a normal situation for them. Uh, the problem with great apes like that is what are you going to do with them? You can't simply send them back to the wild. Um, I don't know whether Harambe was actually born in captivity or was captured. He was born in captivity, was he? Well,
Yes.
he would not have the skills to survive in the wild,
Mm,
and also some of the areas where gorillas lived are no longer safe for them. Some people are poaching them, hunting them. Of course, there are sanctuary areas as well, but they can only support a limited number of gorillas. So, what I think should happen is that we should have these large, if you like, open plains zoos where there are plenty of room for them to roam around and have
mm,
a more interesting environment, and where they can live in a social group. Now, if they've been in isolation, it might not be easy to get them to adapt to a social group, but it certainly can be done. It has been done, and I think that's a better situation. If there are some people who want to look at them as well, if they're not disturbing them, I don't object to that. But the main point ought to be providing for the best interests of the animals rather than providing for the best viewing for the spectators.
It's so perfectly said, because there's such a lack of respect for the animals that we have, and again, that comes down to the speciesism, which is a problem we find, in every aspect almost of animal interaction, in the world, aside from maybe our pets, which still has some issues there.
Yes, but I mean, it depends again on how you keep pets.
Mhm,
If you have a dog and you just have one dog and you leave the dog alone in your apartment or house when you go out to work all day, that's not good because dogs are social animals. But
mhm,
if you treat the dog as a member of the family, you make sure that the dog has company and essentially look after it as you would your own child. I don't object to that. I'm not saying that everybody has to give up having companion animals, but it does depend on how they're treated.
absolutely, absolutely, and that I think that is so. Considering what we're doing worldwide, we're learning that there's, and we need to sort of keep that unity with animal rescue and animal rights, and animal rights. And to me, that people think that nature needs. What are your thoughts on the world without our management?
Well, I mean, it's not perfect either, of course, right? Uh, Nature has evolved. It's not a consciously designed process. I don't believe that it's something designed by an omniscient and benevolent creator. I think it simply has evolved with species surviving. If they can reproduce and their offspring survive, then the species survives. So that's not always a benevolent situation at all. There are predators and there are prey, um, but perhaps even worse, there are species which reproduce by producing thousands of eggs, and many of them hatch, but usually only two of them on average will survive. Otherwise, the species would multiply to the point where it was covering the planet. So, um, nature can be cruel, but generally speaking, when we interfere, especially if we interfere by capturing animals out of nature and putting them in an environment that is not suitable for their needs, we're just making things worse.
And that, have you seen changes in people's views on speciesism and other species over time, and where do you think we are right now?
I have seen changes, yes. I've used the term in my 1975 original edition of Animal Liberation, and a lot of people ridiculed it. Um, uh, I think that that's changed. There may still be some people who do that, but um, there's widespread support. I'm currently here in Paris, where I've been launching the French edition of Animal Liberation Now, the new and fully updated version of the original book. And when I was in France shortly after the first edition was published, France was pretty hostile to the idea that we should not be eating meat, because, of course, the French pride themselves on their cuisine, and if you're not going to eat meat, you can't eat the classic dishes. But I just spoke last night to a large audience, maybe 500 people, a fairly young audience of people who are generally very enthusiastic and supportive of the idea that we need to completely transform our relations with non-human animals. And many people, when I was talking to them afterwards, mentioned the concept of speciesism and regard themselves as anti-speciesists. Good to see a lot of people working in this area, a lot of influential, powerful documentaries employing the concept of speciesism and making a difference in the way people see animals. So that's good. I mean, obviously we haven't succeeded. We've still, as I said, got a very long way to go, but it's there. The book is around. The book has never been out of print for the last 49 years. That's pretty amazing, the way books are treated nowadays. So I think it's great that this movement is around. There are far more um, vegan products available in supermarkets. People didn't even understand what the word vegan meant in 1975. Nobody used that term, but now it's everywhere, and so definitely we're making progress.
Beautiful. And one last question before we go. I've always been fascinated in movies how the killing of an animal is seen as a rite of passage. Um, the idea that once you lose your kindness, you become an adult. And this is a theme that's been echoed in so many movies across, ever since even the 20s and 30s. Maybe people were more attached to the cruelty of farming and things like that back then. But do you, or I guess, how do you see that out there as well, or how do you see it? Do you think that is one of the things that maybe we need to change, or is it something that you found as well, socially, to sort of be a problem, that the idea of
Well,
killing or as a rite of passage?
well, I have to say that I think that's too sweeping, that statement, because if it is a rite of passage at all, it's a rite of passage for males. I don't think it's a rite of passage for females. And, of course, we're talking about a society that is still male influenced, male to a greater extent than females, but that's becoming more egalitarian and is recognizing a woman's perspective alongside a man's perspective. And I think this is one area in which we can definitely would do better to develop the more feminine side of our nature, um, uh, which is a more caring side than a killing side. And that's what we need. We only have to look around the world today. We just have to look at what's going on in Ukraine or Gaza, and we can see that this idea of killing is leading to terrible, terrible atrocities. So I think we really need to change that, and to place caring instead of killing at the center of our moral universe.
Oh, exactly. The path forward comes through kindness and empathy in our hearts, interacting with our minds, which is
That's correct.
the
Yes,
way
that's what
forward.
it's got to be.
And Peter, thank you. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to
Okay,
talking soon again.
good. Great to talk to you. I'm glad we could connect.
Definitely. Thanks, Peter. Have a
Okay,
great day. Talk to you soon.
thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. I apologize that we had to record that and weren't able to do it live. We have some time zone challenges right now with everybody in travel, but it was incredible to be able to speak to Peter Singer and learn a little bit more about speciesism and learn about the concept of how we can apply moral ethics to our lives as a beginning foundation. A lot of these things should not be afterthoughts, and in previous societies they were afterthoughts. And like he said in the interview today, it's very important that our path forward is one with a very different relationship to the world around us. So instead of exploitation, use, death, all the things that generally animals go through in our world, in the human world. We need to change that, redefine that, and start treating everything around us with respect. There's a part of the book that always really caught me, that changed the way that I think. And he says that it's not, as far as speciesism goes, when we talk about all the species, we're not talking about equal rights, because every species has a different pattern, a different way that they need to do things, a different accomplished goal they want to accomplish, a different reason within their lives of what their purpose is within the world. And but what we do need to give them is equal consideration. So equal consideration to all animals around us through love, maybe one of the only ways we can move forward. And I encourage you to hear everybody's comments. What do you think about this? I feel like this is the path that can lead us to the new future that we haven't fully conceived of yet, but one where we do have equal consideration for all beings.